Well, good morning. There are there are a lot of names I don't know this morning. Some of you I've met for just the first time today, and some of you I just met for the first time last week. And I don't like that. I don't like not knowing folks. I say that just to say that we probably 30% of our crowd this morning are new folks. Our folks either for the first time today or folks that were new last week. And I just want to ask our guests to be patient with us because probably we've had guests greeting guests this morning. And so please be patient with us as we try to learn who you are. You could really help us a lot. I hate to fill out stuff. I don't like writing my name on a card, but I would beg you to do that before you leave today. Not because we're just going to put it in a filing cabinet somewhere. I mean, we want to know who you are. Ephesians 4 talks about how the purpose of the body is to help us grow. God puts us together in local churches in order to provide supply lines for each other, to equip one another for growth. And so connection is a really important ingredient in that. And so we really want to know who people are, because the only way we can help each other with accountability and with growth and with teaching and all of those kinds of things is if we really get to know each other. And so I say that earnestly because we really want to know you. And so please write down your name, or there's going to be a dozen texts and emails that are going to go out this afternoon of our folks trying to learn who all was here so that they can know your name and remember you the next time they see you and get connected. That's really going to happen because our folks really are earnest to want to get to know each other and to want to get to know the folks that are visiting among us. And so I hope you'll help us in that way, because that'll make it a lot easier for us to get to know you more quickly today. Thanks for being here, and thanks for the way you've worshiped and for the heart that you have for God. I want to invite you to open up to the book of Ecclesiastes this morning, please. Ecclesiastes chapter 12. And the lesson this morning is all going to be extracted from primarily one verse in Ecclesiastes 12 that states a principle that is very fundamental to all of us. It's especially fundamental to us in our youth. In fact, that's who Solomon, who was the wisest man in his day, that's who he addressed this to. He addressed it to a young man. And so he's giving us counsel, or he's giving us wisdom that's especially important for us to get when we're young. Abraham's 11. And I was thinking about Abraham when I put this message together, because it's a message that he needs to know. It's something that he can practice right now at his stage in life. If you are Abraham's age or older, then you ought to get this lesson. Some of you that are younger than Abraham are going to get the message today. But if you are his age or older, then this is a message that's important for us to get. So are you listening, Abraham? Because this is for you. And it's for all of us to get this important principle that can really help us in all of our days, but especially in our youth. And to learn it in our youth is particularly important. Solomon says in Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 1, "Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come, and the years draw near when you will say, I have no delight in them." He goes on then to describe what happens as we age. He talks about our teeth getting old. He talks about our back getting old. He talks about us getting where we wake up early in the morning, and when we have trouble hearing, and when we have trouble seeing. And so he says, before I get old, I need to learn the thing that he talks about in Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 1, where he says, "Remember your Creator in the days of your youth." Now, I want to simplify that a little bit, and paraphrase what he says here. When he says, "Remember your Creator," he's saying to you, Abraham, and to you, Reagan, and to you, Josh, and to you, Tristan, to all of us, he's saying to us, we need to remember that God made us, right? Isn't that the point of remembering our Creator? Remember that God made you. Now, when he says remember, he's not saying that we're going to be walking along and all of a sudden forget. When he says remember here, he's saying for me to purposely call that to mind. He's saying for me to think about how God made me. And not just think about it so that intellectually I say, well, when we play this game with Omar, who made the birds, who made the deer, who made the trees. And Omar knows the answer to that question. He's not saying here just intellectually for me to know that God made me and that God made everything. He's saying, remember, think about how God made you and act like it, right? The fact that God made me ought to change the way I behave. When I know that God purposed me, that God made me, and when I live my life thinking about how God made me and how God made my world, that ought to change the way that I live. And so God wants that principle to be established in my heart when I'm young so that it changes me forever, so that it changes the way that I handle life, so it changes the way I handle problems, so it changes the way I behave in school, it changes the way I behave with my friends. It ought to change everything. And so I want to talk this morning about some of the things that it ought to change. When I think about how God made me, what are some times especially that I need to remember that I need to think about that? Number one, remember that God made you when you look in the mirror. When you look in the mirror, remember that God made you. Somewhere, God thought about Lonnie. Who decided what color eyes she'd have? Who picked out her hair color? Who picked out how big she'd be when she was born? Who knit the soul that He then planted in that little baby's body? God did that, did He not? Amen. And He did it for little Andrew. And He did it for Lindley, and He did it for Lauren. And He did it for all of our children. God, at some point in time, made a decision that a new soul was going to come into existence, and so we were born. Now, does that not make you important, Abraham? Does that not make you important, Brooke? I mean, God decided He would bring you into the world. And He made you uniquely you. And so when you look in the mirror, think about the awesomeness of the fact that God decided that you would be born. God decided that He would give you the gifts that are yours, that He would give you all the things that are physically and intellectually and talent-wise. All of those things are choices that He made. So, some of the biggest trouble we have growing up is not being happy with who we are. Not being satisfied with how God made us. I wanted to be Superman when I was little. I wanted to leap tall buildings in a single bound, and I wanted to be faster than a locomotive. I wanted all those things. And so I begged my mom to dye my hair black and to put a little curl right there because I wanted to look like Superman. And she wouldn't do it. She do it now. So much of the trouble I got into growing up was trying to be somebody I was not. Was trying to fit in someplace where I didn't fit. Someplace where I didn't belong. Trying to behave some way different because of some dissatisfaction with how God made me. Dave Long and I were good friends, best friends growing up. Dave was a good athlete. Dave played first base. I played first bench. Dave was the running back, and I was the water boy. I was tall. I was 6 foot tall when I was in junior high school, but I could not dribble. I could not shoot. I could not pass the ball without somebody else stealing it. I went out for the basketball team, and I didn't make it. And I was so humiliated to be tall and not be any good at basketball. But you know what? I'm just not any good at basketball. God did not make me coordinated. That's not one of my gifts. It's not one of my strengths. But one of the things that we learn in life, sometimes we learn more from our limitations than we do from our strengths. Our strengths are good. Our limitations are good for us, aren't they? It's good for us to know the things that we're not good at. It's good for us to be humbled about those things. It's good for us to know the things that we are good at and not to be ashamed of those things and not to be embarrassed about those things and not hide those things. But to take how God has made us and glorify Him in that. God made your looks. When you look in the mirror, God made you the way that you look. So look your best for Him. God gave you your mind. So think your best for Him. God gave you your talent. And our talent is not so that we can show off. Our talent is not so that we can get applause. God gave us our talent. He gave us our gifts so that we can learn to serve with those. And so when you look at your talent, when you look in the mirror, serve your best. God gave you your limitations. Just like He made me uncoordinated. God gave you your limitations, and so do your best for Him. God gave you your personality. He gave you your sense of humor. He gave you the quirky way that you see things, the perspective that's different from everyone else. And so be your best. God gave you your family. And for all of us, there are things about our family that we adore. And for all of us, there are things in our family that frustrate us. But you know what? God gave us our family so that we could learn how to love. Because there's a lot of grace that needs to go on in family because we mess up a lot in our families. Our family sees the best and the worst in us. And so it's a context in which we learn how to get along with all of those imperfections. And we learn something about God's love for us and our imperfections. So God gave you your family. Love them your best. God didn't like the way you looked, He would have made you differently. So you look your best for Him. If someone doesn't like the way that God made you, they can take that up with God. Don't let that change the way that you behave. God never made anything without a reason. He made each of you just exactly the way that He intended. And isn't that grand? Remember that God made you when you fall in love. Remember that God made you when you fall in love. God gave you Abraham. God gave you Peyton. God gave each of us, as humans, a capacity that is unique, that's a part of being in His own image. He gave us the ability to love. Dogs and cats don't do that. Animal creation doesn't do that. That is something that's unique to man. It's a part of being in God's image. And I want us to appreciate how precious that is. That is a great gift, that God has given us the ability to show love, to express love, to seek what is in the best interest of the object of our affection. You know how precious that is? It is so precious that God sent His Son to die so that He could win that from us. God showed us how much He loved us so that He would win our affection, our love, that we would choose to serve Him the best because He has done the best for us. He's given the best for us. That's how precious love is. And what that means is that I need to be very careful about giving my heart away. Does that make sense? Because love is that precious. And so listen, don't give love away cheaply. Don't do that. Because it's way too precious. I fell in love when I was 12. Head over heels. We wrote each other notes every day and passed them to one another as we went from one class to another. We didn't have any classes together. We did that for 4 weeks. And then one day I got a letter. It said it was all over. It broke my heart. It was March. We had fallen in love like right before Valentine's Day. I had gone into Dutton's grocery store, and Dutton's grocery store every year put out this heart that had chocolates in it. And they must have set that out every year for 3 years, and nobody had ever bought it, and I bought it for her. Well, March came and it was all over. So I went home and I had kept in this shoebox under my bed all the notes that she had ever written to me. Dad had gotten some straw for mulching the garden. And I had went up behind these 40 bales of straw that we had put between these two trees. And I was going to have a little purging. So I took a 5-gallon bucket and I had all my love letters in the shoebox. And I went up there and I was going to burn them all. So I put them in the bucket and I set the notes on fire, and it made a big, made lots of smoke. And I was afraid somebody would see, and so I kicked the bucket over and was going to put the fire out. And when I did, it caught just a little bit of that straw. Do you know how fast straw burns? It was a conflagration. I mean, it was some kind of fire. All of the neighbors came out. I ran down and got the water hose and started running across the garden to go put it out, and it wouldn't reach. The volunteer fire department showed up at our place. They ran out of water, and they had to go down to the river and fill back up the tank again and come back and put the thing out. And everybody in the neighborhood knew about my heartbreak. It was so humiliating. We do foolish things when we fall in love. Don't we? Have you done foolish things when you've fallen in love? You folks my age. And we do foolish things when we get heartbroken. And all of that ought to make us really, really careful, because you will break things when you fall in love that you can't unbreak. You will do things when you fall in love that you can't undo. You will say things that you can't unsay. You will give away things that you can't ungive. And so be careful with your heart. Because love is a precious thing. And God has given us, He has designed for us a time and a place and a way for all of that to be done so that it is beautiful and a glory to Him. But there can be lots of regret with loving somebody more than you love God. With giving away things that you should only give away in the time and the place that God ordained. So remember that God made you when you fall in love. Remember that love is a precious thing. Remember that it can be a great blessing when we honor God with the love that we feel. Remember your Creator. Remember that God made you when you choose your friends. Remember that God made you when you choose your friends. God can find for you good friends. Our kids are studying about David right now. Did David find a good friend? He did. And he found a good friend, a best friend, in the most unlikely of places. God found him a friend in the house of his enemy. Jonathan was the son of Saul. And what a blessing Jonathan was to David, and what a blessing David was to Jonathan. God found friends for Daniel. 3 good friends while he was in captivity. And again, in the most unlikely of places, God found a friend for Daniel who was a friend, who were friends, that shared his values. We can do some foolish things in the wrong kind of company. Dave and I did a lot of dumb stuff when we were growing up together. Most of the trouble I got into when I was with Dave. And most of the trouble he got into when he was with me. When we went away to college, we were separated as friends. We had this dumb fight. And we were not as close after that. And now Dave's back in my life. And I learned an important lesson about friendship from all of that. Dave is a good man. And God didn't need me to make him a good man. That's pretty humbling. Our friendship didn't make him that way. I didn't help him be better when we were young. I want that to be different now, and it is different now. Dave makes me better. I want to make him better too. And I love that. I love the fact that God has given us an opportunity as adults to redeem our friendship from some of the... Not that it was all bad. It wasn't all bad. But I tell you, sometimes you look back at the folly of your youth and it feels like it was all bad. And there was a lot of folly in the things that we did. I wish that I had been a better friend to Dave. I'm sorry, brother. We've got some great young people here. Be a good friend. Be a good friend. Make your friends better. Make your friends love God more. Don't compromise your values for your friendship. It is hard to be popular and to be right with God. I tried that. It doesn't work very good. Because you look for the laud, the praise, the acceptance of others more than you do the acceptance of God. And you make some foolish choices when you do that. And so bring God into your friendship. There was a young man that used to visit his girlfriend that was a member of the church where we grew up in Oak Ridge. And he had this cool car. And we all admired his car. He was not very spiritually minded. We went out after services and he was in his car and he was playing music, and there were some other teens that were around where he was, and I was younger at the time. And I made my way over to kind of see what was going on. He was sitting in the driver's seat. And there was kind of a group around, and folks were laughing. And I came up, and the group parted just a little bit. And he looked at me. And have you ever been in a situation where you immediately know from the look that you don't belong, that you're not wanted? And that was kind of the way I felt in that moment. And it was very awkward. And he said to me, "What are you doing here? You don't belong here. You're too straight." That was in the church parking lot. And I felt like I'd just been punched in the nose. You know, I still don't like being left out. I still don't like not belonging. I still don't like awkwardness. But I wish that I had always been too straight for some company. I wish that that had always been my reputation. That I was a person that cared for what was right, for what was straight. That was not always the case. There are going to be times where friendship means making some choices that means that some people aren't my friends. It means that some groups are not my groups. Those are some of the hardest choices that we sometimes have to make in life. Or to decide what influence I'm going to be with my friends, or what influence I'm going to be with the group. Remember that God made you to be able to make those kinds of choices. Because who my friends are shapes who I am and what I do. For me personally, that has shaped me more than anything else in my life. Who is really close to me dictates a lot of who I am and what I think and what I become. So I need to remember that God made me when I choose the people that are my friends. Here's an important one. Remember that God made you when you speak to your parents or to anyone that's in authority. God made you in His time. He made those who were born before you so that you would learn about authority. God expects us to show regard for those who are older than us, regardless of how worthy we deem a particular individual worthy of such respect. Do you know that? Part of the reason why God made people that are older than me is so that I can learn to respect people that are older than me, so that I can learn some respect for wisdom and for age and for authority. And so there are warnings like this given in the Bible. 1 Timothy 5, verse 1. Do not sharply rebuke an older man, but rather appeal to him as a father, to the younger men as brothers, the older women as mothers, and the younger women as sisters in all purity. 1 Timothy 5, verses 1 and 2. Now he says, don't sharply rebuke an older man, but you appeal to him with respect. Do you know who he said that to? To a man who is at least in his 30s, perhaps in his 40s. He's talking to Timothy, and he's telling Timothy as a preacher that he needs to be sure that he shows respect to those that are older than him. Now, if that's true when I'm 30, it ought to be true when I'm 13, right? Yes. God wants me to show respect to those that are older. You shall rise up, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 32 says, you shall rise up before the gray-headed and honor the aged, and you shall revere your God, I am the Lord. Do you know that God commanded the children of Israel, when an older person came into the room, for you to stand up out of respect for them? Give them the chair, give them the seat, just because of respect for who they are. We communicate respect not just with what we say, we communicate respect with how we behave. Your body language says something about whether you respect or disrespect someone else. It speaks to your attitude. Else, why would the Lord say, rise up before the aged, if standing up didn't communicate something? It says something, you see. And so if standing says something, then there are all kinds of things that say something. When you slump in your seat, when your mom is talking to you, you say something. When you shrug your shoulders, when you roll your eyes, when you sigh heavy, when you mumble under your breath, all of those are ways of saying, I defy you. And that ain't good. The Lord doesn't like us to defy our parents, to defy the aged. He wants us to show respect. He made us in His time, so that we could learn that important lesson to show to our parents, to show to our teachers, to show to our grandparents, to show to our elders. So remember, God made you when you speak to your children. When you speak to your parents. Finally, could I say to you, it'd be good to remember when you speak to your children too. Finally, could I say to you that you need to remember that God made you when life disappoints you. I wish I could say to all of our kids that people will never disappoint you. That there will never be events in your life that will disappoint you, but that ain't true. You will have disappointments. That's part of the point in Ecclesiastes chapter 12 is Solomon talking about the things that are going to happen. In fact, he spent the whole book talking about things in life that without God, if God is not in the picture, then life under the sun has a lot of sorrow in it, has a lot of brokenness in it. And so we need what God brings into the picture. We need to get out from just living under the sun. We need to live under God. We need to see that He's the umbrella that we live under. Because there are going to be things in life, Abraham, that are going to disappoint you. There are going to be people in life, Emma, that disappoint you. And that is going to be, that is our common experience. And so when there are disappointments, I need to remember, it is so important then to remember that God made me. When situations disappoint you, remember God. He would not have let it happen if He didn't think you could handle it with Him. The trouble that we inherit in life is partly a testament to His confidence in us, but His desire for us to find Him so that we can make our way through that. He gives us some vanity in life in order to teach us that life is incomplete if He's not a part of it. We need Him to make sense of it. We need Him to rule us in it. We need Him to rescue us from it. And so when situations disappoint, remember God. Remember God when people disappoint you. Because He made all people just like you, with the freedom to make their own decisions. And so when people choose poorly, it's not God's fault. It is their choice. Just like when we make choices that disappoint. And so I have to choose how I'm going to respond when other people disappoint with their poor choices. Remember God. Remember that He made you when life and when people disappoint. In the book of Revelation, there's a scene that's painted in chapter 20 of all nations standing before God and books being opened and God judging people out of the books. And it talks about God reading the names that are listed in the book of life. I've told you before, when I was growing up, I didn't care for my middle name. It's Frederick. I like it now because it's my dad's middle name. And it was my granddad's first name. And so Frederick means something to me now because it's a connection to my dad and it's a connection to my papa. If on the day of judgment God wants to call me Frederick, when He's reading the names in the book, that'll be just fine. If He wants to call me by my first name, that'll be fine too. If He wants to call me by all three names, Jason Frederick Moore, the way my mom used to when I was in trouble, that'll be okay too. And if the Lord just wants to point at me and say, hey, you, get in here, that'll be okay too. But you know what I know about God? He wants all of our names in His book. He made you so that you could be in His book. And not just in His book, so that you could be in His presence, and not just for a little while. My father has a big house, and he has a house that's big enough for all of us to live in it, and to live in it forever. Isn't that something? And He made all of us so that we could have that, we could inherit that. remember him so he'll remember you. Think of him because he's thinking of you. Start to do that now while you're young. Think of him as you look in the mirror, when you fall in love, when you choose your friends, when you speak to your folks, when life disappoints. Because we need him. We need him. Won't you come to him today if you're not a Christian? If we can help you with dying with Jesus and being risen with him in baptism, acknowledging him as your Lord, transforming your life with repentance, we want to help you with that. Won't you come as we stand and as we sing?